When a corrupt anti-Trump judge humiliates JD Vance in court, he thinks he's above the law. But when his target fights back, karma hits fast, leaving the entire courtroom in stunned silence. And before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The day began like any other at the federal courthouse, but from the moment Judge Marshall Davis entered, his foul mood was palpable. He barked orders to his clerk, dismissing any notion of courtesy by forbidding even a sip of coffee, and threatened the defense team with contempt charges if they did not appear within 2 minutes. The gallery was packed, and every seat in the room buzzed with anticipation and anxiety as Davis strode to his bench, his face already flushed with irritation, and his eyes narrowed in contempt. His reputation for harsh treatment was well known, yet in recent months his behavior had escalated into outright erraticism, especially in cases involving conservative figures, making it clear that his personal biases had overtaken his judicial responsibilities. When the court clerk cautiously announced, "Your Honor, Vice President Vance has arrived for his testimony," Davis's expression darkened instantly as he sneered. "Well, isn't that special? Make sure he knows this isn't the Senate floor," emphasizing that in his courtroom, titles and positions meant nothing. The atmosphere shifted palpably as J.D. Vance entered with quiet dignity, nodding respectfully to the court staff, his every step measured and composed in stark contrast to the judge's explosive demeanor. Davis watched him like a hawk, drumming his fingers impatiently on the bench and declaring with venom, "Let's get something straight. I don't care what position you hold in Washington. In this courtroom, I am the law. Is that clear, Mr. Vance?" Vance's measured response of "Crystal clear, Your Honor," only seemed to fan the flames of Davis's ire, prompting the vice president to calmly state, "I'm here simply as a witness to the truth," to which the judge scoffed dismissively. "Truth? We'll see about that." Shifting his gaze toward the defense table, Davis announced, "Now, let's get this circus started," interrupting the defense attorney's opening statement, where the attorney had begun to explain, "Your Honor, we're simply establishing the context of Mr. Sterling's charitable contributions," with a cutting remark. "The context is that your client is accused of tax evasion, period. I don't need a history lesson about his so-called charitable work." Each time the attorney mentioned Sterling's community contributions, Davis would cut him off with escalating hostility, demanding, "Irrelevant! Move on! I won't warn you again!" as his gavel pounded the bench so ferociously that even the court reporter struggled to keep pace with the rapid-fire interruptions. When it came time for Vance's testimony, Davis's behavior deteriorated even further. He snapped at Vance, "Stand up straight when you take the oath, and speak clearly. I won't have any political doublespeak in my court." Even as Vance maintained impeccable posture and calm composure, Vance then began, his voice steady and resolute, "I can attest to Mr. Sterling's financial transparency regarding the Faith and Family Foundation," only for Davis to theatrically roll his eyes and retort, "Oh, here we go. Another conservative fairy tale about family values," a comment that stirred discomfort in the gallery and even among members of the prosecution. Yet Davis pressed on, declaring, "Let me be clear. I've seen enough rich conservatives try to hide their money behind charitable facades. Your presence here doesn't impress me, Mr. Vice President. In fact, it makes me question the defendant's character even more." As the proceedings continued, Davis's hands began to tremble slightly as he shuffled through a stack of papers, his eyes nervously darting to specific documents on his desk that he seemed desperate to With measured determination, Vance continued, "I have here documented evidence of Mr. Sterling's charitable contributions, including records from the March Foundation meetings," only to be interrupted by Davis's booming interjection, "Those records are inadmissible." Even though no formal objection had been raised, a sudden outburst that revealed an oddly personal panic in the judge's demeanor. At that critical moment, the defense attorney rose, his voice gaining strength as he demanded, "On what grounds are you? Don't you dare question my rulings." Davis's face turned a deeper shade of red as he warned, "One more word, and you'll be joining your client in contempt." The tension in the courtroom became almost unbearable. Even the prosecutor shifted uncomfortably, his silence speaking volumes as it became evident that Davis's actions were veering dangerously into the realm of personal vendetta, rather than impartial justice. With unwavering calm, Vance replied, "These documents were properly submitted during discovery," to which Davis retorted with a sneer, "Oh, were they? And I suppose your fancy White House connections had nothing to do with that? Let me tell you something about your kind, Mr. Vice President." Before the defense attorney's determined objection cut through the mounting chaos, proclaiming, "This is completely inappropriate." In response, Davis roared, slamming his gavel so forcefully that the sound echoed throughout the chamber. "I will not be lectured about appropriateness in my own court, especially not by some conservative puppet and his—" Before Vance interjected with a steady voice, "Perhaps we should discuss the specific contents of the March 15th meeting," a suggestion that visibly unsettled the judge. His rage seemed to give way momentarily to fear as he froze mid-gesture with his gavel, staring at Vance as if for the first time, mumbling, Those meetings are not relevant to these proceedings," while his eyes remained fixated on a particular folder that had mysteriously appeared on his bench that very morning. Vance, undeterred, pressed quietly, "Not relevant?" prompting Davis to stutter. "That's interesting, Your Honor, considering those meetings directly involved charitable contributions to—" Before abruptly slamming both hands on his bench and declaring with ferocious intensity, "One more word about those meetings, and I'll have you removed." The gallery fell into stunned silence as the judge's composure visibly crumbled, his shaking hands betraying the desperate attempt to maintain control over a situation spiraling out of his grasp. In a manic surge, Davis continued, "I'm holding you in contempt right now. You think your position protects you? You're nothing but a Trump lackey in an expensive suit." Yet Vance remained unfazed, calmly countering, "My position has nothing to do with this. But since you mentioned protection, perhaps we should discuss the Liberty Foundation's protection payments?" The mere mention of such payments caused Davis's face to drain of color, shifting from red to a ghostly white as he stammered, "How dare you? I mean, what payments? There were no—" Before suddenly bellowing, "Guards! Remove this man from my courtroom!" At which point the court officers hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances as the gravity of Davis's overreach became apparent to everyone present. Seizing the opportunity, Vance reached for his briefcase with deliberate calm and, "I have some very interesting bank records here," prompting Davis to demand with rising desperation, "Would you like to explain the monthly deposits from offshore accounts that coincidentally align with your rulings against conservative defendants?" The judge's voice grew louder as he screamed, "Shut up! You have no right, no authority. I am the law here." Yet Vance held up a document with quiet resolve and replied, "Your signature on these authorization forms suggests otherwise, Your Honor." A moment that sent a ripple of shock through the courtroom. In an impulsive reaction, Davis lunged forward, trembling as he pointed a shaking finger at Vance and spat out, "You planted those." "This is a setup," before his words devolved into a chaotic stream of accusations hinting at a vast conservative conspiracy. Vance, with a calm that bordered on icy detachment, softly echoed, A conspiracy? And then stated firmly, "Interesting choice of words, Your Honor, especially given your private meetings with certain activist groups. I will not be interrogated in my own court." Even as Davis began practically foaming at the mouth, hurling insults and demanding, "You think you can come in here with your smug face and your evidence?" Vance continued, his voice resonating steadily. "Evidence that shows a disturbing pattern, one that recalls the Thompson case last month, where a small business owner lost everything because you wouldn't allow evidence of his charitable work to be presented," which provoked Davis into a near-hysterical laugh about the Thompson case, as he claimed that such conservative fraud deserved its fate, asserting bitterly, "They all deserve it. These people think they can hide behind their faith and family values while—" only to be interrupted again by Vance, who calmly produced another document and suggested, "Or perhaps we should discuss the Wilson hearing, where you mysteriously sealed all records just hours after meeting with representatives from the Liberty Foundation." At this, the judge's face twitched violently. He stammered, "How do you know about—" but then abruptly stopped, caught between confessing details of a secret meeting or acknowledging the $100,000 that appeared in his offshore account the very next day, a revelation that sent murmurs of disbelief through the gallery. But Vance interjected, "Actually, everything was obtained legally. Your own security cameras caught the midnight document shredding, your own phone recorded your threats, and your own signature authorized the transfers," a revelation that sent shockwaves throughout the courtroom. In a final act of desperation, Davis lunged forward, reaching wildly across his bench toward Vance's evidence folder, demanding, "Give me those files! I order you to—" only to be cut off by a resounding authoritative voice from the back of the courtroom declaring, "Order denied!" All eyes turned as a team of FBI agents marched down the center aisle, their badges gleaming under the harsh courtroom lights, and the lead agent announced firmly, "This court is now under federal investigation. Judge Marshall Davis, stay where you are." Davis shrieked in disbelief, "You can't do this! I have immunity. I have connections. Do you know who I am?" To which the lead agent replied coldly, "Oh, we know exactly who you are, Your Honor, including your recent meetings with the Liberty Foundation, your offshore accounts, and your coordinated efforts to target conservative defendants," causing Davis's eyes to dart wildly around the room as he searched in vain for an escape, muttering that it was all a setup, a conservative plot, only for Vance to interject quietly, "The only plot here was your systematic abuse of power, Your Honor. Every biased ruling, every backroom deal, every attempt to silence the truth. It all ends today." Trembling with rage and despair, Davis accused, "You planned this. You and your Trump-loving conspirators set me up." But Vance calmly retorted, "No, Your Honor. You set yourself up. We simply gave you enough rope to hang yourself with. Your own words and actions today have confirmed everything we already knew." As the FBI agents closed in and moved to secure the bench, Davis made one final frantic attempt to cling to power, shouting, "I am a federal judge. You can't arrest me. I am the law. I am the law." But his protests were drowned out as the agents physically restrained him, forcing him away from his chambers as he screamed incoherently about, "You don't understand. They made me do it. The foundation. They have dirt on everyone. If I talk—" only for the lead FBI agent to coolly demand, "Now, that's interesting. Tell us more about this foundation, Your Honor." At that moment, Davis's defiant sneer faltered, replaced by a mix of terror and resignation as he muttered, "I want my lawyer. And when this is over, you'll all pay for this humiliation. Speaking of payment," while Vance stepped forward and produced yet another document, calmly stating, "Perhaps you'd like to explain these transfer records. 7 judges, all receiving similar payments on the same days you did, all ruling against conservative defendants in coordinated cases." The gallery erupted in shocked whispers as it became undeniable that this was not the misdeed of one corrupt judge, but part of a vast, insidious network undermining the very foundations of justice. With a voice that carried both authority and quiet conviction, Vance continued, "The evidence suggests that this was a systematic effort to weaponize the judicial system against those who dare to uphold conservative values. But justice is not meant to be wielded as a weapon. It is meant to be a shield, protecting all Americans equally." At that moment, Davis stood as a broken man, his once mighty facade crumbling as court officers began sealing off his chambers for further investigation, and his beleaguered clerk was whisked away for questioning by FBI agents, tears streaming down her face as she confessed to having been forced to destroy vital evidence under his tyrannical threats. With a final defiant turn of his head as he was led away in handcuffs, Davis spat bitterly at J.D. Vance. "You think this changes anything? There will always be others like me." To which Vance replied softly yet firm, "There will always be those who abuse power, but there will also always be those who stand up against them. And that is what makes our justice system work." In that moment, the message was clear. Corruption may run deep, but the courage to fight it is even deeper. And as news of Davis's arrest rippled through multiple jurisdictions, investigations were launched into every corner of the compromised judicial network. The once feared network of corrupt judges began to crumble under the weight of mounting evidence and brave witness testimony, with perhaps the most dramatic turning point arriving when Sterling's case was dismissed by a new judge who found no basis for the charges after reviewing the very evidence that Davis had desperately tried to suppress. Ultimately, the events of that tumultuous day served as a powerful reminder that justice is not decided by those who seek to control it from behind closed doors, but by those courageous enough to stand up for truth and accountability, even in the face of overwhelming opposition. If you believe in the importance of fighting for integrity and accountability, remember to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more inspiring stories that prove no one is above the law. God bless you, and God bless